And joining us now on our Book Talk segment on Talk Across America, pleasure to welcome a woman who's written a book about her father. And of course, as we celebrate Independence Day this week, very appropriate, one of the members of the greatest generation. And it's called Football Flyboy. First Lieutenant Bill Cannon piloting more than his own aircraft. We're joined by his daughter, Lisa Reinicke, from out in the beautiful state of Colorado. And it's a very interesting book about his life as a pilot in World War II and letters that he sent back home, and kind of weaving a story along with that. And Lisa joined us by telephone to talk about it. Lisa, good to talk with you. How are you?
Hey, good. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to have a chance to talk with you for a couple of minutes. I know Kayla sent us the information about you and the book, so we wanted to have you on. And, of course, my dad was a member of that greatest generation as well, serving in World War II. And I had an uncle I never met, unfortunately. He was actually a pilot. Survived Pearl Harbor and unfortunately died in a plane crash about a year later. But, boy, those people that did that back then, they had a lot of guts, didn't they?
Boy, they did. And, it's amazing because now I've started going through his letters when he was in cadet school. And these guys just didn't have very many hours in an airplane before they went over there.
Yeah, I've interviewed some other authors that have written about that era and the planes, the way they describe it. It's amazing those things even got in the air back then.
When I was doing some of my research, it said that we lost a third of our planes during that time was from pilot error. A third got shot down, in combat, and a third made it home.
Yeah, very high statistics, unfortunately. But these guys had incredible skill to fly these planes, and you really flew those planes back then. I think planes today almost fly themselves, but back then you did all the work.
Yeah, they sure did, and they didn't go. They didn't fly that high either. We get up to 30,000 feet of cruising altitude, and there wasn't oxygen on board.
That's right. Yeah, they had to fly quite low when they particularly went on missions, bombing missions and things like that.
They weren't pressurized or anything, so it's kind of amazing to read some of that.
Well, let's talk about the book. And again, these are it's letters that your dad wrote home while he was serving overseas to your mom. Was she your mom at that time, or was she going to be your mom? They weren't married at the time.
Well, they were married. They married just before he went overseas, and I didn't come along till 10 years later, and some of that's in the book too. All these babies kept coming and coming, and they couldn't have one. And you see in all these letters, they're talking about children, and then they never get one. So that's kind of interesting. And then I was adopted.
Mm-hmm. I know you discovered these letters. I guess it was in a big package somewhere in the house, hundreds of them, right? So he wrote, a couple times a week or more, right?
There are thousands when we start going through them, but they were in his footlocker. So he came home with 2 footlockers, and they were in the garage, and when I opened one, there are all these letters, entwined together with the ribbon. And when I untied that first batch, it was the first day that he left for overseas. And it was kind of neat to get to read all that. When you start digging into somebody's life like that, you're not always sure what you're going to find.
Right. Yeah, anytime you find out about your parents, the years they grew up, maybe you don't want to know everything, right?
Right. So, and the more that I read and the more that I learned about him, we hear so much on the news now about, the bad things or the bad things that men do, or we're giving men a bad rap. And so to go through all this and see that there's a good man. We need to hear these stories of good men in the news instead of all the bad.
Sure, yeah. What was it like? Did you just kind of spend a whole weekend or something reading through them all at one time? It must have taken a while, and I guess that was a bit emotional for you too, I would imagine.
It was to read all that and to see at 19, what was he like, 18 and 19? You get to see a whole different side of a person that you knew all your life. It was like meeting him when he was 18 or 19. It was a really great experience, and I did not read them all at once. kind of doled it out over a little period of time as I could.
And he put so many in the book, and these aren't all of them, obviously, in the book, but you picked the ones that really kind of narrated his life at the time. Was that a challenge for you to kind of weed it down and pick out the ones that you wanted to add at this time?
It was. When I started going through it, I thought, well, you could get boring if you did too many of them at a time. So I just chose to do when he first went over through Christmas, and then I stopped at Christmas, right after Christmas, and then I went to his very last letter where he said he was coming home. Mm-hmm. So we get to see August through Christmas, which was the biggest part of what he did, because he went in at the end of the war. So we get to see when he first went over, so we get to see his travel of all around the world. So he went from Bangor, Maine to Labrador, Labrador to Greenland, Iceland, Scotland, France, Cairo, Karachi, and then he went and flew over the hump. That was one of his missions, was flying over that hump. And then he went from, I believe it was Shanghai, over to Manila, and then flew the Philippines for quite some time before he came home.
Yeah, that's where my dad served when he was overseas. He got good duty at first. He was in Atlantic City, and then they sent him to the Philippines for a couple of years. So that was not a good place to be at that time.
No, the Philippines was hard. And
terrible.
We didn't get to see that piece. So maybe I will do another section, another piece on that we get to see the Philippines, because we get to see it for just a short amount of time in the Philippines, but mostly we see that Shanghai, Burma place that he flew there for a while.
Yeah.
And we get to see him. He was raised in Shawnee, Oklahoma, which is a small town. That's where the football comes from. Is that he was a big football hero star in little Shawnee, Oklahoma, and we get to see him there. He would leave class with all of his football cronies. My mom was a drama poetry reader. He would say, "Alva, if Mary Jo doesn't read the lesson today, me and my buddies are going to leave class," and they would leave class because the football stars ruled the high school.
That's right.
Back then.
Yeah, it's a big football country. Still is, Oklahoma, but even back then it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Well, one letter that kind of stood out to me, and I had a chance to read through the book. You mentioned, toward the end of the war he went in, but he, wrote about the atomic bomb in Japan. So
he did.
That affected him quite deeply, didn't it? Like everybody.
It really did. Now, I was kind of shocked that he didn't say more about the atomic bomb than he did. He mentions it, and he talks a little bit about it, and it was incredible. And to see their attitude, if something like that happened today, we would have quite a different reaction than that generation had back then. There was so much going on in the world back then, and so many bad things that I don't think we can comprehend the human destruction that was going on back then and what it took to stop it.
Yeah. Now, obviously, you had the letters and you were able to read about your dad, but so many people of that generation didn't really talk about it. You've heard people over the years say, that generation just kind of kept it to themselves, or maybe they talked with other people that served, but did he talk about it with you at all?
No, locally? Not much.
No.
There's one section in there that one of my cousins married a Japanese girl. And he went over. She had all of her new family over to dinner, and when he got there, he just didn't eat. When he wouldn't eat her food, it was kind of amazing. And there's 4 liberated sisters in his life that you get to know in the book too. And they must have torn him up when he got home. And Nancy said when I interviewed her about the dinner, she said, well, the next time they came over, he ate. So those girls must have torn him up because she was American. She was born in America.
Right.
But there was something about, he saw the face of the enemy in her when he went over to dinner, and he just couldn't eat.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure there was a lot of that at the time.
But he got over it.
Yeah.
He got past it.
Yeah. Well, it's a great, like you said, it's historical, but also your personal family story as well, and it's called Football Flyboy, First Lieutenant Bill Cannon, piloting more than his own aircraft, filled with those great letters that he wrote and saved. That's the best part, that they were saved over all those years. So they were kept somewhere safe, and you were able to have it. So that's a great history that you have.
And his letters are very entertaining too, to get to read them when he goes home. He's really mad because he can't get any mail either. I think he gets mail twice.
Well, Lisa Reinicke, give out a website if you have one so people can get more information about the book. We'll put a link on ours as well, but do you have a website?
It's just my name, LisaReinicke.com.
I'll just spell it Reinicke, the last name, and check it out. Again, Football Flyboy. Lisa, pleasure talking to you. Hopefully we can do it again down the road. If you have another project, please keep in touch with us, but thanks for being with us today.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate you having me on.